Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stellar Development Foundation's first quarterly call of 2021. We're so excited you could be here with us today. I'm Lauren Thorbjornsen. I'm the head of communications at SDF, and I'm going to be your guide on today's call as we take you through all we've accomplished so far since the start of the year. I'm joined today by three of SDF's amazing leaders, our CEO, Denelle Dixon, our Chief Marketing Officer, Jordan Edelstein, and Vice President of Ecosystem, Justin Rice. To quick recap on what's going to be on the agenda, Denelle is going to start us off with a strategy overview and the progress we've made on our 2021 roadmap. And then she'll dig in on how we're mapping to our objectives specifically for fostering sustainable use cases. Then Jordan's going to pick up on what we're doing to be the blockchain people know and trust, namely in our marketing and communications efforts and in our broader legal and regulatory engagement. And then lastly, Justin's going to close the show with more about the network's growth metrics and our technical work. We'll, of course, have time at the end for Q&A, so feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, specifically into the Q&A tab that you should see on your toolbar. And with that, I'm very excited to hand the show over to Denelle Dixon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us here today. I look forward to this every quarter. It's an opportunity for us to share with our ecosystem and community how far we've come in just a few short months. So I want to start, as I usually do, with a reminder of our strategy. At the start of Q1, we published our roadmap for 2021. In it, we outlined our vision for the year and our plan to achieve it. We focused on some specific measurable objectives to guide the work. So our three strategic pillars, they haven't changed. We put them together in 2019 and we re-looked at them last year and decided that they still fit for where we want to focus. They're supporting the robustness and usability of Stellar, helping Stellar be the blockchain people know and trust, and fostering and developing sustainable Stellar use cases for cross-border payments and securitized assets. So we mapped out unique and specific aims for each under each pillar. And not surprisingly, as I think I've said before, all roads lead to growth for Stellar in 2021. With each pillar anchored around growing Stellar in meaningful ways, and also growth of the number of entities building on Stellar. So growth of relevant transaction volumes on Stellar and growth of the number of people that know about Stellar. These are all really important metrics that we focus on. So because transparency is such an important value for SDF, it isn't just a matter of putting the roadmap up, but also we want to share our progress along the way. And that's what this quarterly call is all about. To make sure you're aware of what we've accomplished and how we're tracking on our commitments. And the TLDR for Q1 and this review call is that not only are we seeing the network grow on all measures, but we also have some really important deliverables out the door to drive that growth. And even better, we built and strengthened relationships across our ecosystem and beyond to drive more progress for the rest of the year. So it's all oriented around toward achieving SDF's vision of creating equitable access to the global financial system. So let's start looking at the amazing work we've done on each of these pillars. I'm going to start with the conversation with a look at what we've been doing to foster sustainable use cases on Stellar. So if you were paying attention to anything that we were talking about at this last quarter, you almost definitely heard us talk about the launch of Stellar USDC. It was really exciting for us. That's because it's one of the most meaningful ways SDF worked to foster sustainable use cases this quarter. Bringing USDC to Stellar really brings together the best this industry has to offer, pairing the world's fastest growing USD stablecoin with the world's fastest moving network. There are a lot of reasons that this is big news for our ecosystem, but also for our partners at Circle and the Center Consortium. Stellar adds an established, mature network to Center's consortium, and the network's differentiated features that help businesses and developers leverage Stellar USDC in really meaningful ways. Standard compliance protocols, performance at scale, on-chain foreign exchange, our incredible Stellar anchor network, and really low fees that stay that way. And our unique focus on cross-border payments and transaction use cases will allow USDC to further penetrate the financial stack by expanding from trading and DeFi, its existing foothold, into remittances and B2B cross-border payments. So there's a whole lot of potential there to tap into. And I think the thing that I'm most excited to see is what this will mean for our anchor network. Given USDC's strong position in the market and the important use cases that rely on digital dollars, anchors are eager to provide access to USDC and expand where it can go. So the benefits? Well, businesses can now expand into markets they've never had access to before, thanks to these anchors. And users can also send payments on an international scale with unprecedented speed and low costs. The more anchors that support USDC, the more liquid and the more global USDC will become, and the world's financial system will connect to a degree that we haven't yet seen. So Q1 saw that first go live moment, which has opened the door to all of this opportunity. And now the work continues on getting businesses up and running with the on and off ramps and additional integrations that will take this to the next level. We've got some things lined up, and I look forward to sharing them with you as they come to fruition in Q2. So I can't move on though before saying what incredible partners we've had with Circle, and that we really admire the work that they've done to ensure that USDC is the leading digital dollar stablecoin in the world. Having USDC on Stellar brings confidence and reputability to those looking to transact on the network. The relationships that we've developed with this partnership really set the stage for how this technology grows into the mainstream. And the kind of relationship building has also been an important focus for us in Q1 on the path to fostering sustainable use cases. So relationships with consulting firms, for example, a group we targeted in our 2021 roadmap, that's one of the areas that we focus. At SDF, we believe consulting and technology firms, large, small alike, they're going to play a critical role in driving blockchain adoption. Just over the last quarter, the industry has seen a number of significant moves towards mainstream adoption of digital assets in the wider economy. This includes institutional firms that are supporting investments into digital assets, fintechs, and then larger consumer-facing firms enabling end user to interact with such assets. And more countries announcing explorations of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and digital assets. This shift into the mainstream is likely to come in two forms. Privately, via large enterprises adopting digital assets for cross-border payments and broader access, and then publicly via central banks issuing CBDCs. So consulting firms are going to be key in onboarding these entities, and we already see that they are. So in Q1, the team has developed and begun a concerted effort to coordinate more tightly with these firms, meeting with large firms as well as some smaller firms who specialize in onboarding clients into Stellar. To help lead this effort, SDF onboarded a full-time role with the business development team to run these types of relationships and ensure that the Stellar network is top of mind in the drive for mainstream adoption. And speaking of digital asset strategy, at the country level, at the start of Q1, we'll get the slides back up in just a minute. At the start of Q1, we announced our partnership with the Ukraine Ministry of Digital Transformation. Together, the Ministry of Digital Transformation and SDF are working to develop a modern virtual asset market infrastructure and enhance Ukraine's status as an innovative digital country in the financial market. In this capacity, SDF was busy during Q1 collaborating closely with the ministry and its national counterparts, as well as large financial institutions in the country, to increase awareness of Stellar and map out our next steps, including a webinar that's scheduled for spring 2021. And lastly, we've been in close collaboration with Franklin Templeton as they've prepared to pilot a tokenization platform on Stellar. They're also planning to run nodes within the scope of their engagement with the network. We're really excited about that. So there are other ways that we're working towards fostering use cases through relationships, and that's by supporting new and existing companies building on the network through the Enterprise Fund. So in Q1, we surpassed our goal of having at least one investment per quarter. That was what we wanted. But we made 3 for a total of 6.5 million. While the profiles of these investments are quite varied, they're based in different geographies, focused on different use cases, but they each hold great potential to fuel growth of Stellar. We started the year off with Wire, a leading blockchain payments company. The investment will facilitate their integration with the network and enable Wire's world-class payments API to support financial applications to the Stellar ecosystem. In particular, integrating with existing anchors and enabling Stellar USDC on and off ramps in existing fiat pairs, USD, GBP, CAD, AUS, and the Euro. We followed with an investment in Cowrie Integrated Systems, an ecosystem company that is focused on cross-border payments. Our investment is designed to help them to develop their growing remittance corridors and promote public-private partnerships in pursuit of regulatory clarity, given recent news coming out of Nigeria's central bank earlier this year, a topic that we'll come back to in just a little bit in this webinar. These funds will provide Cowrie with resources to continue to expand their operations in emerging markets and further develop payment corridors between and into and out of Africa, with an initial focus on Nigeria, given its status as the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa. And lastly, we reinvested in DStock. It's a Liechtenstein-based fintech company that seeks to make investing accessible and affordable for people in emerging markets by providing zero-fee access into the global stock market, which is pretty cool. We built our initial investment. We made it the start of last fiscal year, to support this incredible company as they seek to expand their reach into new markets. These use cases, they're aligned with our mission in so many ways, but I'm not going to say more because Jordan, our CMO, is going to unveil our latest case study where you can hear all about DStock's incredible work directly from them and their users.
Cool, thanks Denelle. Really excited to be here with everyone today to talk about what we're doing to make Stellar the blockchain people know and trust. And as Denelle just mentioned, a big part of that work is how we bring visibility to the efforts that so many of our inspiring ecosystem companies that are building on the network and highlighting that work. And doing that is really core to our marketing strategy, which is why over the last few months, we've worked with the DStock team to prepare this case study that explores the ways they're making investing accessible and affordable for people in emerging markets by providing zero-fee access into global stock markets. So with that, I am thrilled to debut the new work.
We wanted speed, we wanted low transaction costs, and we wanted to enable users to trade peer-to-peer on a global basis. And we found a Stellar blockchain which provided all of those things. DStock is based in Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein is a very beautiful country. It's in the mountains. You've got a river and there's a castle. It's very innovative towards capital markets and blockchain in particular. And it is a fantastic place to do business. At DStock, we have a range of products. We have a DeFi app that is making investing easy for people in emerging markets. Users can get access to investing directly from their phone. We also have an API that businesses can use to integrate with if they want to help their users getting access to investing. And if they want to abstract away a lot of the complexity of investing and just have a simple way to offer new products to their existing user bases. Historically, if we look at investing, most wealth generation that's happened in the last 100 years has been from people buying shares of companies. And for people in emerging markets, they might not have the same types of opportunities that someone in, say, America does when it comes to growing their wealth.
You have to externalize your funds, and then you have to go through an external broker, and those brokers usually have high minimums, high fixed fees, and they only make the investments viable at a much larger scale. So not really for retail investors like myself.
We built our app with first-time investors in mind. And for them, it's very important to have a good user experience, for things to be as simple as possible and as fast as possible. How it works is we buy shares in Europe. We then tokenize them on the Stellar blockchain. Those tokens are then able to be traded directly on the Stellar DEX, which is a decentralized exchange. It's something that doesn't really exist in a lot of other networks. On the DEX, users can post offers for buying and selling of assets, and those offers are floating around the whole world, and they can be matched at any point in time, 24/7, at very low fees and very efficiently. We are seeing a lot of demand coming in for our app from emerging markets, where we reached around 25,000 downloads in the first quarter, and we have about 10,000 monthly active users. We're also seeing 100% month-on-month growth in the average account size of the users on the platform, on the app.
DStock has enabled me to invest in international companies, which I could never do before. And now I'm also investing or buying small stocks, which I could never do before until now. The investing is going to get me to where I want to be. It's going to get me to a greater career. It's going to put me in a position where I get to work on my own time and choose what I want to do in life.
Destock plans on continuing to grow on Stellar by focusing on making our services and our products available in as many countries as we can, as well as onboarding as many meaningful B2B partners that already have large existing customer bases. Through both of those motions, we aim to grow our business in a very meaningful way that is improving financial inclusion across the world.
Great. Well, Destock, I mean, they really epitomize what we at SDF love to see in the ecosystem, which are companies that can chase real business opportunities and help us achieve our mission around driving financial inclusion at the same time. So you can visit the live landing page on stellar.org right now to learn even more about Destock and watch the video again. And we'll be featuring versions of this content in our paid media as well as at conferences as we head into Q2 and through the rest of the year. Getting this use case ready to share with the world was a priority for the marketing team in Q1. We've got another case study in production right now for release later this year, which will put us on track to hit our roadmap objective. In fact, I'm betting that we'll beat that objective this year. But that's not all we did in Q1 to drive visibility for the network. Denelle touched earlier on the value of USDC coming to Stellar. So our team, the marketing crew, spent a lot of time this quarter getting that messaging out, highlighted by a feature in Forbes, a collection of blogs on stellar.org, highlighting what differentiates Stellar USDC from the other versions of it, and the ecosystem businesses working towards leveraging the integration like Finclusive and Wire. We also did a ton of social promotion where we shared videos from companies across the ecosystem on how they're planning to leverage that integration. We also had a bunch of enterprise fund announcements that Denelle talked about. And so we spent some good effort amplifying those in terms of getting the Wire investment mentioned in Fortune's term sheet newsletter and Crunchbase News' daily briefing. And SDF leaders, we were on the podcast circuit in Q1. Our COO, Jason Chapala, and Justin, our VP of Ecosystem, both had appearances during the quarter on places like Block Hash Podcast and the Gold Silver Bitcoin Podcast. Even I had the pleasure of joining Sam Connor on Stellar Global podcast earlier in March. And then also we had Denelle and our VP of Engineering, Karen Chang, were jointly interviewed on the Decrypt Daily podcast around International Women's Day. And more, speaking to International Women's Day, on the events front, SDF, we hosted our own virtual event to mark that day on women building in blockchain, featuring a talented group of both developers and non-technical women working at SDF. And then on the external events front, we had also a very busy quarter with 10 virtual conferences or appearances in Q1, and also really busy planning for Q2 with a really great lineup of things slated for this quarter. Denelle yesterday spoke at the European Blockchain Convention, and our General Counsel, Candace Kelly, is speaking there literally right now. And some other blockchain conferences and events, including the Blockchain Finance Forum Europe 2021, and will be a consensus by CoinDesk in May. And then we've also now started to crack into broader fintech conferences. And so Denelle will be speaking later this week at the Paris FinTech Forum, and then we'll also be speaking later at the end of the month at Lend It USA FinTech Conference. And then lastly, our marketing efforts in total really drove a lot of growth on SDF's own digital channels. And we saw a lot of increased traffic and, importantly, more engagement. So both quantity and quality. And so, for example, our Twitter engagement rate for the quarter jumped by 33% versus Q4 of 2020. And our continued content marketing campaign efforts are really beginning to bear fruit on stellar.org, where we obviously want people to come and learn about Stellar, but also engage with us and want to learn more. In the month of March, we saw our month-on-month doubling of inbound form fills on stellar.org in terms of March versus February. So really good indicators in terms of people wanting to learn more and engage with us. And so building trust in the network is obviously about raising awareness for Stellar with a lot of different stakeholders. And that also extends to policymakers and regulators. And that's really where our policy team comes in, where they're advocating for the public and private partnership that we talk a lot about to help shape the regulatory future of blockchain. Now, in the US, with the new Congress and new administration, obviously there's new policy priorities coming into place and new officials settling into new roles. So we're anxious to see what happens with a number of the key posts in related to blockchain policy that remain open. And so while there's been a bit of a slowing in terms of legislative and rulemaking activity, one really critical issue to the blockchain community has continued from Q4, and that's FinCEN's notice of a proposed rulemaking related to self-hosted wallets. And so in January, SDF had expressed concerns with the proposal during that initial comment period, and recently in March added to those comments when the comment period was extended and then closed in March. Candace Kelly, our general counsel, who had mentioned, also participated in some discussions around the current regulatory environment at a couple events, both at a panel on blockchain and crypto regulatory issues at FinTech Retreat 2021 in January. And then just recently in March, Blockchain by Women had a panel on ensuring privacy and security of blockchain and digital assets that Candace participated in. And in general, our policy team has kept up its ongoing communication with key stakeholders. That's everyone from FinCEN to the House Financial Services Committee, the Senate Banking Committee, and even the US Department of Commerce. And we continue to advocate for legislation that will bring regulatory clarity and flexibility that blockchain innovators need in order to grow and thrive. And that goal extends outside of the US as well. And so, for example, the focus on Nigeria, as the Central Bank of Nigeria issued their circular that called into some question the digital asset environment in the country, which has implications obviously for Cowrie, the ecosystem partner that Denelle mentioned earlier. So I'll invite Denelle to share some more thoughts on that situation and kind of what we're thinking about to ensure our voices are heard by regulators in Nigeria and around the globe. So Denelle, I'll pass it back to you.
Well, I think with respect to Nigeria, I think this is one of the areas where it demonstrates the importance of that public to private, the combination and the sharing of ideas and thoughts. We're really encouraged by the latest news from the Nigerian SEC and the Central Bank of Nigeria, the CBN, that they've agreed to collaborate and conduct research to find ways to regulate the cryptocurrency market. What's been unfolding in Nigeria over the last few weeks reinforces the importance of that open, collaborative dialogue between stakeholders, like I said, the public and private, to determine the best way to regulate blockchain and digital currency. The initial communications from the CBN, they created some confusion rather than bringing clarity. And it has paused operations of many promising fintech businesses leveraging blockchain technology who are unsure how to proceed. That includes some of those businesses that are building on Stellar. But this isn't unique to Nigeria. So at the end of last year, we saw the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, here in the US, push out a rule proposal that would significantly impact the virtual currency landscape. Not only that they initially only allowed a 2-week comment period over the holidays, it's kind of crazy, but ultimately after the outpouring of feedback from stakeholders, they expanded that. And by all accounts, they're engaging in a meaningful dialogue now with industry. So in both cases, we know that these regulatory bodies, they're doing the best they can to deliver on the tremendous duty that they have to their citizens and to their countries. Consumer protection and deterring financial crimes are values that we share. But attempting to create regulatory frameworks behind closed doors or as a knee-jerk reaction to various pressures isn't the right way to approach innovation. So to do this right, we need to be working together. And I do feel like this is a lot of work that we need to focus on at SDF. And that's why I think that the policy piece is really important. So as we've said before, and we'll continue to repeat, creating the right policy and regulatory framework for blockchain technology will bring us close collaboration and partnership between the public and private sector. That's really the way to go. And for our part at SDF, we stand ready to work with regulators all over the world as they conduct their research. The way that I want regulators to think about this, or folks that are really trying to work with their countries, is that what are they going to miss out on if they don't allow their constituents to have access to blockchain technologies, and really the use cases that build on top of it. So that's the focus that I'd like to get to. So ultimately, this work is really important because we want to make sure that these corridors stay open and can flourish. And we want to continue to drive meaningful network growth, which is what Justin is going to talk about now. So how the network grew in Q1 and what we're doing to keep and to help that growth continue in the future with investments in our engineers and in our community. So Justin?
Thanks, Denelle. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Justin Rice. I'm SDF's Vice President of Ecosystem. And as Denelle mentioned, I'm going to kick off this section about ensuring the robustness and usability of Stellar by talking a bit about network growth. And to do that, I'm going to dig into some numbers. Now, because the Stellar ledger is public record, we can see what's going on the network. And there are actually some easily observable network stats that can really help us answer a key question. Are people using Stellar? The answer, I'm happy to say, is yes. We gathered some metrics that capture network activity, and we'll continue to track them throughout 2021. And today, we'll compare those metrics year over year to their 2020 equivalents. The good news, they all show a significant increase in network activity, all of them. So the first metric, total accounts. There were 5 million Stellar accounts as of Q1 2021. Year over year, that's 10% growth. Second metric, total number of payments. There were 24.8 million payments in Q1 of 2021 versus 9 million in 2020. And that means that the number of payments grew by 160% year over year. So people are creating accounts, they're using them to make payments, perfect. That's what Stellar was designed for. Those payments are also driving volume on Stellar's built-in decentralized exchange, AKA the DEX. So average daily DEX volume, it surpassed 10 million lumens worth per day in Q1 of 2021, which is a big leap from 2020 when the average daily DEX volume was about 3.4 million lumens worth per day. So more DEX activity, that means more currency conversion and more things like destock, giving people access to tokenized assets. So now finally, what about raw network activity? Well, so quick aside, in Stellar vernacular, functions that change the ledger, we call those operations. So a payment, that's an operation, a buy-off or operation. Operations, that's generally what people mean when they talk about transactions. Now, there's a slight distinction because on Stellar, the two words, you can actually bundle multiple operations into a sandwich transaction. But for all intents and purposes, when I say operations here, just picture transactions. So again, what about raw network activity? So to measure raw network activity, we can just look at the total number of operations, and the growth is quite solid. There were more than 270 million operations in Q1 of 2021 alone, which is an increase of almost 100% from last year. And what makes this really exciting is that the continued acceleration, it puts Stellar on track to outpace 1 billion operations per year, which is a lot. So all those metrics that I just mentioned, they indicate a big increase in general network usage. But to round out our view, we also wanted to home in on use cases that speak to SDF's mission to connect global financial infrastructure. And so we started tracking what we call relevant assets. Relevant assets, these are assets that are tethered to real financial instruments, and most of them to fiat currencies such as euros, US dollars, or Argentinian pesos, but they can also include things like the stocks that Destock offers. So by focusing on these relevant assets, we can get a sense of how well Stellar is connecting global financial systems. The growth here is actually, to me, astounding. So last year, 49 assets qualified as relevant, and the total volume of relevant asset transactions for Q1 was around $9.6 million. Now, since then, there's been a big jump. In Q1 of this year, 79 assets qualified as relevant. There are almost $280 million worth of relevant asset transactions. That's a whopping 2,798% year-over-year growth in real-world, cross-border, and cross-currency transactions. So the last set of metrics that I'd like to look at today, they measure the decentralization of the network. So given the important role that decentralization plays in the health and success of the network, we continue to monitor the number of nodes and to look at the amount of time it takes for those nodes to apply a transaction set and close a ledger. And let's start with that ledger close number on the right. So it's interesting because even with the massive increase in network activity we've seen over the last year, the network continues to clip along and to close ledgers in a little over 5 seconds. So there's more throughput, there are more transactions, same ledger close time. The network is consistent, it's reliable, it's like clockwork. Overall, decentralization of the network is also fairly consistent with last year. So they're the same number of tier 1 validators. And again, those are nodes that have a high level of network trust and that are essential to network health and resilience. There was a slight dip in total nodes that participate in the network. So why that slight dip? Now, as many of you know, last week, the decentralization of the network was put to a real test when the SDF nodes temporarily went offline. The same issue that affected the SDF nodes, it also affected several other nodes on the network, hence the dip. The temporary downtime, it actually happened in Q2, so it's kind of outside the scope of what we're covering on this call, but we do want to address it, particularly since we're talking about the health and decentralization of the network. So first, let me say, we're still learning from what happened last week. We anticipate sharing more details as our investigation continues. But the key takeaway, even though the SDF nodes were temporarily offline, the Stellar network itself, it continued to operate. And I'm just going to repeat that, right? Even though the SDF nodes were temporarily offline, the Stellar network continued to operate. It continued to process transactions. And the fact that it did, it actually kind of proves a point that we've been making over and over again. The network is robust enough to persist even without the SDF validators. Now, at this point, the issue that caused the SDF nodes to go offline, we've dealt with it, and it was actually quite remarkable how that happened, and also how quickly that happened. Because to fix the issue, SDF engineers worked in collaboration with the entire ecosystem of validators to roll out Protocol 16, which is the software that contained the fix, and to upgrade the entire network in record time. I just want to point out, SDF cannot do that alone. Validators have to approve network upgrades, and in this case, every single tier 1 validator pitched in, as did the vast majority of node operators on the network in general. So, when you're working with software, you're going to hit some bugs. That is inevitable. But what we know from last week's experience is that and again, by we, I don't just mean the SDF, but I mean the entire ecosystem of Stellar validators, we have what it takes to react quickly to fix problems. And we've certainly become a stronger network as a result. So if you want to find out more about last week's issue, there is additional information on our blog and our Protocol 16 upgrade guide, and we'll continue to update both those resources as new information comes in. But for now, I'm going to get back to what we did in Q1 2021 to ensure the robustness of the network. The biggest step forward was the release of Horizon 2.0. Horizon is the Stellar API, and it's what most people use to interact with the Stellar network. It allows you to submit transactions and to query network data to find things like account balances, right? So anyone can run their own Horizon to access the network. And this release is actually a major milestone that makes doing that a lot easier. It improves Horizon reliability and performance, and it enables both large organizations and also solo developers to deploy Horizon with fewer resources, under looser constraints, and with far more flexibility than ever before. And that's because, and I'm going to get technical for a second, that's because prior to Horizon 2.0, you had to couple Horizon with a standalone instance of Stellar Core to get transaction metadata. Horizon 2.0, on the other hand, it runs a little mini Stellar Core as a sub-process. We call it captive core. That has some big advantages. One, the optimized captive core can process transactions in memory, meaning disk space requirements are really vastly reduced. Two, ingestion is faster, meaning the Horizon database can be rebuilt a lot more quickly. And three, there's no separate Stellar Core instance to manage, meaning no more database requirements for Stellar Core. Now, again, I realize that was fairly technical, but the gist, Horizon is more usable, organizations can deploy it more easily, and that makes the network more robust. So along with Horizon 2.0, we also released V1 of the Stellar ingestion library, which does the heavy lifting of decoding the blockchain so that developers can write custom software that talks directly to the network. And for both these developments, we're very excited to see how they increase network resilience and also how they empower developers to build innovative products on top of Stellar. So in addition to these big software releases, Q1 also saw some major progress in the continued development of standards that allow Stellar to keep moving forward, SEPs and CAPs. SEPs, short for Stellar Ecosystem Proposals, are specifications that allow ecosystem participants to build extra network infrastructure so that they can interoperate easily to facilitate multi-party transactions. CAPs, the cousin of SEPs, short for Core Advancement Proposals, are technical suggestions for changing the protocol itself to expand Stellar's functionality to meet ecosystem needs. Together, these two things, CAPs and SEPs, they're a good indication not only of where Stellar is now, but also of where it's headed next. And Q1, we saw some major improvements to existing SEPs, as well as the acceptance of 2 new CAPs. And these proposals, they both increase transparency to help Stellar be the blockchain people know and trust, and they foster real-world use cases by simplifying cross-border payments and making the issuance of securitized assets on Stellar easier than ever. So let's look at a few highlights. One, based on the transparency standard that was set by Center, who published monthly third-party audits of USDC reserves, the Stellar information file, aka SEP1, was amended to include an attestation of reserve field. So now issuers of fiat-backed assets, they can create a definitive link between their on-chain assets and reserve attestations. 2, after several rounds of iterations, SEP 6 emerged as the standard for API deposits and withdrawals. It also saw a bunch of usability improvements, and it now supports claimable balances, which are a feature that was introduced in Protocol 15. And 3, SEP 10, the Stellar authentication standard used as part of a lot of transaction flows. It added client attribution and also saw improved clarity and a streamlined flow. So together, those two, SEP 6 and SEP 10, they really allow wallets and anchors to interoperate to approve customer deposits and withdrawals in a way that complies with local laws and regulations. And then finally, we also saw some improvements in the regulated assets ecosystem. The first of which was that the actual standard, the Stellar Ecosystem Proposal 8, was updated to address new use cases based on ecosystem needs. And in addition, 2 major Q1 caps focused on regulated assets by improving an asset issuer's ability to control access to their assets. The first, Cap 29, it just modified asset authorization flags to make them a bit more intuitive. The second, Cap 35, created a whole new class of asset control that provides an issuer with the means to claw back designated assets in order to support regulatory requirements. Again, designated assets. Now, both of those, Cap 29 and Cap 35, they were developed in close collaboration with the ecosystem and with the SDF and Core and Horizon teams who work to prototype and validate an implementation. And both add functionality that makes the issuance of regulated assets on Stellar easier than ever. They're also slated for the next protocol release, which we'll talk about next quarter. So SEPs and caps, they come about based on feedback from businesses building on Stellar, and they evolve in part based on input from the broader Stellar community. And that's where I'd like to end today, with the broader Stellar community. So Stellar is home to a super motivated community of startups and developers and enthusiasts who are working together to build the future of finance. This quarter saw continued community engagement and growth, much of which was due to the effort of community-run organizations like Public Node, a 501c3 that maintains Stellar infrastructure and publishes a ton of educational material, and Stellar Global, an ever-growing Discord server that is home to general, regional, and developer-focused discussions. But to help foster that community, SDF also has several ongoing initiatives aimed at supporting new projects and educating developers, and really encouraging any and all to participate in the discussion about Stellar. So some highlights from Q1 2021. First, the Stellar Community Fund, an open competition that awards Lumen grants with input from the greater Stellar community, saw record participation this quarter. 58 projects entered, and after a month of deliberation, the nomination panel narrowed the field to 8 finalists. So the goal of this round is to support businesses building long-term projects with real-world impact. And each of those finalists has a proven track record and a well-defined plan to build and scale a product or service on Stellar. Development also began on an educational support initiative, which will work with colleges, universities, and other blockchain-focused educational institutions to introduce Stellar to the next generation of developers and business leaders. And finally, Stellar Quest, the second series in the gamified intro to Stellar that teaches people about the technology through hands-on coding challenges, it wrapped this quarter. And at this point, over 500 developers have completed challenges. And since it's evergreen, that number continues to grow every day. People are still going through Stellar Quest 1 and Stellar Quest 2. We also completed development for the bigger, better Stellar Quest 3, which we will launch in early Q2. And I'll tell you about next time we have this meeting. So these initiatives, they help support the thriving Stellar community, which hand in hand with the network, it continues to grow year over year, and to do so in a way that I personally find inspiring and motivating. And that feels like a good place for an end to our program content. I'll turn it back over to Lauren for the question and answer.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Denelle and Jordan, for that wonderful presentation. It is now time to take questions. Thank you to many of you who've already submitted some, so we'll have a few to get started. But again, you can submit your questions into the Q&A toolbar, and we will try to get to as many as possible before we have to wrap the call. So the very first one that I want to kick off here with, Denelle, I think this is probably for you, which is, what are our priorities for Q2? What are we focused on?
So it's hard to break down priorities every quarter because we have our roadmap, and you'll see there's a lot in there. But what we have just done, because we created goals for the quarter, and then we have all of the teams internally working on their OKRs, their objectives, and their key results. The goals center around liquidity and ensuring that we have improved liquidity on the DEX. You guys keep talking about it out there. We listen, we hear, we're working on it. Our community is working on it. There's a lot going on in the dev channels with respect to this issue. And then there's a lot going on in terms of thinking at Stellar and work in the engineering teams, as well as in our teams that focus on liquidity. So there's that. And then the second one, I think, as a priority is really focusing on use cases. And you can sort of wrap it around USDC and the fact that USDC is now live on Stellar and has been for most of Q1. And in Q2, we really want to see these use cases being built around that particular asset, as well as the rest of the assets outside of the US. But we think that if we can bring more volume to that asset and create more network effects, that's what use cases can do. So I say those are the two top ones. We also have, I'll just tell you, an internal goal for SDF to focus on diversity and inclusion within the organization. And that's really an important component for how we work, and frankly, what I like to focus on and how we care about one another and bringing a lot of different perspectives into the organization. So that's another goal for the quarter, but the other two are probably the two that you were focused on.
Thanks, Denelle. This next question I've got here for Justin. Everyone seems to be talking about NFTs. What's happening with NFTs on Stellar?
It's a great question. I mean, first of all, we are actually hosting an NFT roundtable on Thursday, which I urge you all to attend. I mean, definitely the SDF is mission driven, and we're focused on use cases like cross-border payments. And we, to be clear, are not planning to focus on NFTs ourselves. But one of the coolest things about the open participation nature of Stellar is that there's a whole vibrant ecosystem of projects out there that are exploring topics, including NFTs, and building solutions to the problems that they find interesting. And so there's a lot of activity that's happening on NFTs on Stellar. You can go look at Lightmint, for instance. And it's just something that is sort of proof of the fact that the ecosystem can take advantage of the open nature of Stellar to tackle problems that they find interesting. And that development doesn't have to be led by SDF.
Cool. This next question, I think, Denelle, comes probably back to you, which is there's some interest, a couple of questions coming in about how are we working on CBDCs and with what kind of groups?
Yeah, so we spend time on the CBDC issue from our policy side of the house, as well as from the engineering side, and supporting different groups that are thinking and talking about CBDCs. The groups that do this obviously are governmental bodies. And so we do engage with governmental bodies in different parts of the world on this issue. A lot of this comes also from those consulting relationships that we talked about. A lot of governments reach out to consultants. And so having those consultant relationships and us talking about how useful Stellar is for CBDC and the interoperability potential with respect to it. And then non-governmental organizations, so NGOs. We spend a lot of time on policy, really addressing questions around how they should be going out to talk to other governments about these issues. And so it's kind of all across the map in terms of the folks that we need to pay attention to on this. And frankly, this is a topic that I love because it brings in all the time I get to say that public to private partnership, which is so important because CBDCs can be really, really valuable, particularly if they leverage the existing infrastructure that private organizations have developed. So I think that public to private, focusing on interoperability, making sure that it's not just, we would love them all to be issued just on Stellar, but we're very realistic that interoperability cross-chain is important too. So to be able to do that in a similar way that USDC has done it is important. So all of these issues are things that we address very often, and we love that space.
Exciting use case there. Jordan, I think this one probably is best for you. Some folks are curious about what's happening on the Vibrant front and when we could expect marketing there to ramp up.
Yeah, I mean, I can say a bit, and Denelle, if you want to pile on. I mean, anyone who's, my background prior to SDF was in mobile apps. The amount of product polish that you go through is really critical in terms of user experience and making sure the funnel is working. The Vibrant team on the development side has done a ton of work in that regard, and marketing is now starting to ramp in Argentina. I know they've started running paid media for acquisition and starting to get some real traction in that market in particular. So they know that the marketing folks on Vibrant have been sort of raring to go, and the product is kind of getting to a place where they're able to now start bring people in and make sure that the app's performing how they want it to.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add on that is that I want to see this marketing happen as much as all of you do. But I also love what we've been able to do with Vibrant. When we talk about use case development, one of the really important things is that we understand and we learn from the development of Vibrant about what needs to be brought to the network to be able to make it easier for others to develop on it. That's what Vibrant's done for us a lot. So it might feel like there's fits and starts with respect to it. I feel it too, by the way. The team feels it. But the truth is, it's just brought so much more comfort and knowledge into how to develop this network in a way that applications can build on it and be successful. So with that, I feel like we are finally to the place where we feel really good about the way, not just that Vibrant looks, but the way that it interacts with the infrastructure and the way that it interacts with all the anchors and the other bodies on the network that they need to leverage. So I want to see this off and running, and I'm going to put pressure on Jordan to do that too.
Well, and just to speak a little bit further to what you just said, Denelle, I know, like, for example, DStock and Vibrant, those teams talk, right? So they're going through very common experiences, right? A consumer-facing mobile app, which is part of DStock's business in terms of, okay, how's that working? Where have the hiccups been? What are you seeing in terms of the funnel? How is it integrating into Horizon? And so that, we have that experience now in-house, having done it ourselves, and the Vibrant team, they have regular calls with the folks at DStock to help kind of optimize on both ends.
Okay, switching gears a little bit here, Denelle. Some folks, there were a few questions that came in asking specifically about SDF's funding and how we, manage our budget. So maybe you could give a little insight into our accounting structure and how we buy or how we sell lumens.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, I saw some of those questions in there, some of them more aggressive than others, but I want to say that I think that we're very clear about what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to sell lumens in order to do something that you guys aren't going to see. So we do sell on centralized exchanges. Our mandate page is very clear about what we're doing. You can see what's happening. In fact, that's how all of you know what's actually happening and where movement is happening. We sell lumens on exchanges, as the mandate page explains, and we only do this to fund the operations of SDF, but also to support the investments that we make and the use case development and the growth of the network. So these lumens that we sell are only being used, and I'll say this again, and I'm probably gonna have to say it time and time again, to support our mission, which is creating equitable access to the global financial system. So there's no secret there. It's very clear what we're doing. Please keep track of us. If you think that there are better ways that we can describe it, I'd love to hear about it. Let us know. But I think that the mandate page is very clear, and we're going to continue to, that page updates by itself in terms of the number of lumens that are leveraged, but it all goes to the things that we lay out in terms of what's happening with respect to what SDF is focused on. Remember, we don't have shareholders. We're a nonprofit. We pay taxes, but we don't have shareholders. So this is all going to the growth of the ecosystem. I think that's an important point.
Thank you. Justin, next question here for you, I think. Are you working or partnering with any universities to do research on how to improve stellar tech?
Yes. Last quarter, we really started to think about how we could better engage with and work with and collaborate with universities. And we spent a lot of time just like reaching out to a lot of different people to figure out how we could best collaborate, how we could support them, what would make sense, the best way to sort of structure relationships. And this quarter, we're really starting to focus on building out those relationships. And so we're talking to universities, we're talking to not only educational programs, but to researchers at universities to sort of help them, to support them as they do research that helps us understand Stellar, how to make it better, and just sort of give us that academic insight that is vital to sort of validating a lot of what happens in a complex system like a blockchain. And so I would say if you are interested, at some point soon, we're actually going to be launching a lot more information about this university program. If you're like listening to this now and you ask that question because you are one of these people, write to me, justin@stellar.org. We are building these relationships as we speak.
That's exciting. Denelle, the next question here. There are some proposals about AMMs and liquidity pools on Stellar Core. Do you believe that this is something we're going to see on Stellar Core this year?
So what I love about this is that I'm on the developer thread, so I get the developer updates and like what ideas people bring to us. And they're not bringing them to us, they're bringing them to the community and the ecosystem. And that's where these came from. So absolutely, we are focused on this. Like I said, liquidity is a really important issue for us, and we're focused on that in Q2 and Q3 and probably Q4. So whether we'll see specifically liquidity pools and AMMs, I don't know the answer yet. But you can see if you're part of our developer network and you look and you go on that thread that there's a lot of momentum there and there's a lot of discussion there. And we respond to what's happening in the ecosystem. So we do our part to support. This wasn't our proposal, it wasn't our idea, but we can help to move it along. So this is one of the things we're focused on. Well, both of them, liquidity pools and AMMs, is one of the things we're focused on looking at. So I'm excited about the opportunity, particularly because it came from someone else who, it's always really nice to not get so like caught up in what we know and to have other folks out there bring these ideas. So I think that it's one of the things that we'll continue to look at, among other things. I saw another question in here talking about layer 2 ideas, and layer 2 proposals. We're also looking at those. Those aren't focused so much on liquidity as they are on throughput, but we're definitely focused on that as well. And we have a team that's looking at that for Q2, and hopefully we'll have some resolution on a proposal for Q3. So these are things that we're excited about. It's so fun to see this kind of change and development in a network that's frankly as old as ours, because I think that, and you see this kind of thing in newer networks, but it's fun to see it in our network that's been around for a lot longer. So I'm excited about what we can do.
A related question about ecosystem engagement. One here about how Dan from Securrency is an author on CAP 35, and curious about what the relationship between SDF and Securrency is and how we work with them.
Oh, well, Securrency is an ecosystem partner. Securrency is phenomenal in terms of the work that they do, not just for our network, but they also know other networks as well. We love Dan. We think Dan's great. He's got a lot of good ideas. The CAP 35 proposal wasn't only written by Dan, but it was written in conjunction with some of the work that Securrency had proposed. That is the nature of our relationship with them. We actually do, we have done projects with them, but it's mostly just that they're an ecosystem partner and they do a ton of work to support the network and to build on the network and to create interesting alternatives on the network, like CAP 35, which is the clawback function, which I think is a pretty cool idea if you're going to get to securitized assets.
Following up on that, what makes someone a good partner for us?
For SDF. A good partner for SDF is someone who cares about the network and cares about creating network effects. I mean, this is really what we need to do. For all of those of you out there who have ever actually tried to build an ecosystem, or frankly, even just tried to build a small business, you know what's most important is the relationship that you have with one party and how that is going to create another relationship with another party, and how that then creates users for maybe both of you, but that you can actually grow an ecosystem. Network effects are huge. And so partners that are important for SDF, I mean, frankly, we love all of you who are building out there, even those of you that we don't know. Because it's great that you're using this technology and making it better. That's the nature of an open source project. But we really care about those people who want to improve the network, create relationships on the network. Part of Justin's team actually spends a lot of time just connecting different companies within the network and the ecosystem so that they can learn from one another and hopefully build business relationships together. So the perfect partner for SDF is one that's going to help us to increase the network effects for the network and to grow our user base and developers as well as consumers and businesses.
Jordan, so we only have a couple minutes left, guys. So we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can squeeze in here at the end. Jordan, this next one is for you, which is just generally about marketing and how we kind of approach marketing and get ourselves out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think we sort of approach it in different ways. I mean, one of the things that's really unique about our space is we have a very wide range of targets, from sort of individuals all the way up to larger enterprises in terms of driving interest in Stellar as a project. And so what we do to reach out to those different targets varies. And so I know there's a lot of conversation, and had a good conversation with Sam at Stellar Global about kind of, hey, we don't see marketing, and a lot of it is not targeted at sort of the individual. I think we do also, our social media, which anyone can see and everyone does see. Obviously, we try and share as much as we can in terms of what's happening on the network, things like this destock case study is not something that just lives on a landing page for people to come find. It's great when people do that, but when we start running paid media, whether we run it on Twitter or LinkedIn or through Google, we will be always kind of use case forward in our marketing in terms of like, look at what these companies have done on Stellar. And we think that's really the best way to drive what Denelle mentioned earlier, which is we're trying to drive network effects. And so, by showing, look at what all these other companies have done and how Stellar has empowered them to do that, that's really kind of what we focus on from a marketing perspective. And, we're building, our marketing team has grown significantly over the last 18 months. Our marketing spending has gone up over the last this year versus last year. We have a lot planned for 2021. We're starting our Meridian conversations in terms of trying to figure out how to navigate that in an even more uncertain world than last year. But I think we feel really good about kind of how we're going out into the marketplace, how we partner really closely with our business development team in terms of bringing on new partnerships. That's ultimately what we're trying to do, is not just drive awareness for awareness sake, but we're trying to drive awareness that can ultimately lead to engagement and then people building on the network.
We have time for probably about 2 more questions, and I want to give Denelle here the opportunity to chime in on one that's coming in, just for any additional explanation you can give on last week's validator halt.
So I think Justin did an awesome job, not surprisingly, explaining what happened with respect to our nodes going down. It happened like at 2 a.m. my time. I woke up at like 4:30 and saw it and was like, oh my God, what is going on here? There was already tremendous amount of work being done to make this, to correct it from the SDF standpoint. So I think the question that I saw in there was focused on, what are we doing with respect to make this so that, am I proud of the work, and what are we doing to make this better? I am so proud of the team and how quickly the SDF team was able to remediate the situation, because we couldn't actually just spin up a bunch of validators right away. We needed to understand why it happened so that then we could spin up the validators to make sure that that wouldn't happen again right away. So that it took a little bit more time than we would have liked, but we were very cautious in terms of how we approached that. So the validators were up and running within an hour once we actually started that process, once we figured out, once one of our developers internally, John Joe, figured out what had happened. So I'm so proud of the team and how well they actually, we came together as an organization to really make this happen. The fact that the network continued to operate is exactly what the network is supposed to do. So for that, it was just validating, to use that word in that way. It made us feel like we've cracked this decentralization nut in the way that we had said we had done for time and time again. But we actually, it proved itself to be true, because the network continued to operate, transactions continued to go through. Are there things we need to learn from it? Absolutely. We need to learn things about like Horizon. We want more people out there to be running their versions of Horizon, because there was a lot of reliance on our public API for Horizon. And so that way it actually did make it so that some folks who submitted transactions didn't get them through because they were using our public Horizon, which was down as well. So we want to see more Horizons out there. Justin and our other engineers internally had done a ton of work actually trying to get other folks to run Horizon. And also we need to be able to future-proof this in terms of understanding what we do, like what should we do when this happens, if this happens again, from an SDF standpoint. So these are things that, it's software. As Justin said, there are bugs. We don't like the bugs, but the outcome that the validators, that the rest of the network continued to run was a pretty remarkable outcome. And I don't think that that's something that we can ignore. I think that's something we should celebrate, and that we definitely do celebrate it internally. So we're looking to learn more from this, not just for our validators, but for others who go down. Event hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does, we need to future-proof it, right? So that we can share that kind of knowledge out to the rest of the org.
Sounds like we're going to have even more to talk about in Q2, not only about readout from that, but also a lot of the other exciting announcements that we anticipate. And we are at time, so unfortunately we can't take any other questions, but we appreciate you all being here. Justin, Denelle, Jordan, thank you so much for your time. Just as a reminder to everyone, we will have the recording available on our blog with a quarterly report that kind of recaps all of this for you to look at. So you stay tuned for that, and we'll put that out on Twitter soon.
Thanks, everyone. And Justin is not being held captive.
Or is he?
No comment.
Right answer.
Bye, everyone.